30,000 years ago, an alien race built the most dangerous factory in galactic history. The machine could pump out unlimited warships using nothing but star power and pure evil. Way out in the unknown regions, there's this massive space station floating around a star. It's called the Star Forge, and it's basically a giant ship factory. But here's the crazy part. It doesn't need raw materials or workers or anything normal factories use. It just sucks energy from the star next to it and uses dark side force power to build whatever you want. Think about that for a second. You want 1,000 star destroyers? Done. Need 1,000,000 battle droids? No problem. The thing never gets tired, never runs out of stuff to build with. As long as there's a star nearby and someone feeding it dark side energy, it'll keep cranking out ships forever. The aliens who made this thing called themselves the Rakatan. They ruled most of the galaxy back then because nobody could fight their endless fleets. Every world they attacked got the same choice: surrender or face wave after wave of fresh ships until you're beaten. But the Star Forge came with a nasty side effect. The station fed on bad emotions like anger and hate. The more the Rakatan used it, the meaner they got. It was like the machine was making them evil on purpose. Eventually, they became so cruel and twisted that their own empire fell apart. The thing they built to conquer the galaxy ended up destroying them instead. For thousands of years after that, the Star Forge just sat there empty. The Rakatan were long gone, and nobody else knew where to find it. The only clues were these ancient star maps hidden in temples across the galaxy. Then 2 Jedi decided to go looking for it. Revan and Malak started out as good guys fighting for the Republic. But when they found the Star Forge, it changed them. The dark side power coming off that station was so strong, it turned them into Sith Lords. Malak ended up killing his own master and taking control of the whole operation. Now the Republic had a real problem on their hands. Malak was using the Star Forge to build a Sith fleet bigger than anything they'd ever seen. Every time Republic forces won a battle, it didn't matter. Malak would just build more ships to replace the ones he lost. The war dragged on for years, with entire planets getting wrecked. It looked like the Sith were going to win because you can't beat an enemy with unlimited ships. But then something unexpected happened. Revan came back to the light side. The former Sith Lord gathered what was left of the Republic fleet and launched one last attack on the Star Forge itself. Ships fought through clouds of Sith fighters while soldiers stormed the station. Deep inside its control room, Revan and Malak had their final lightsaber fight. Revan won, but killing Malak wasn't enough. The Star Forge was too dangerous to leave sitting around. Someone else would just find it and start the whole nightmare over again. There was only one solution: blow it up. Republic engineers planted explosives all through the station's guts. When they went off, the Star Forge finally died after 30,000 years. All those assembly lines and docking bays got blown to pieces and scattered across space. The Republic won, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of good people died in that final battle, and whole star systems had been trashed during the war. Finding the Star Forge had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. People still dig through old Rakatan ruins, trying to figure out how they built something so advanced. The Star Forge mixed technology with force powers in ways that don't make sense to modern science. It pulled energy from stars, made ships out of thin air, and turned feelings into weapons. But everyone who studies it learns the same thing. The Rakatan built their anger and hatred right into the machine. It wasn't just corrupting people by accident. It was designed to make everyone around it worse. That's the real lesson of the Starforge. Power without wisdom will always lead to disaster. The Rakata had tech that was better than anything we have today, but they used it to hurt people. Their greatest creation became their greatest mistake. A child touches a painting and accidentally breaks time. One teenage Jedi managed to do what every Sith Lord in history dreamed of, and he did it by accident. Here's how it happened. Ezra Bridger was exploring an old Jedi temple on Lothal when he found this weird mural on the wall. It showed three beings called the Mortis gods, along with some wolves running in circles. Pretty standard ancient art stuff, right? Nothing you'd expect to be dangerous. But then some wolf creatures called Loth wolves gave Ezra a special stone and told him to use it on the painting. When he touched the stone to the mural, things got weird fast. The painted wolves started moving like they were alive. They ran around in circles faster and faster until the whole floor cracked open. A glowing hole appeared where solid rock used to be, and Ezra could hear voices echoing up from somewhere deep below. Being a teenager, Ezra did what teenagers do. He jumped through the mysterious glowing portal without thinking about it first. Welcome to the world between worlds, the most impossible place that's ever existed. Picture a realm where time works like a broken clock. Past, present, and future all mixed together in hallways made of swirling energy. Doorways float in the air like windows, and each one shows a different moment from galactic history. Ezra walked through corridors filled with these windows and realized he could see everything. Battles from years ago, conversations happening right now on distant planets, events that hadn't occurred yet. It was like having access to every security camera in the galaxy, except the cameras could see through time. The really crazy part was that these weren't just recordings. Ezra could hear the voices of people in those windows. He could reach through and touch things. The past wasn't just something he could observe. It was something he could change, and that's exactly what he did. Through one of the portals, Ezra saw his friend Ahsoka Tano fighting Darth Vader in a Sith temple. The duel wasn't going well. Vader had beaten her, and he was about to deliver the killing blow that would end her life. Without thinking, Ezra reached through the portal and grabbed Ahsoka, yanking her out of the past and into the world between worlds. Just like that, he'd saved someone who was supposed to die. Someone had just rewritten history. Death had become undeath. Fate had been changed by a kid who stumbled into the wrong room. News of this discovery eventually reached Emperor Palpatine, and you can imagine how that went. The guy who spent his whole life trying to cheat death suddenly learned that there was a place where you could literally edit the past. He wanted that power more than anything he'd ever wanted before. Palpatine immediately sent his agents to tear apart the Lothal Temple. Imperial mining crews started digging through ancient stone, looking for another way into the world between worlds. If the Emperor could control that realm, he could undo every defeat, prevent every threat to his rule, and reshape history to make himself the eternal ruler of everything. But Ezra and Ahsoka weren't going to let that happen. They realized that some powers are too dangerous for anyone to have. The ability to change the past sounds great until you think about what someone like Palpatine could do with it. He could erase the rebellion before it started, prevent Luke from ever being born, or just keep rewriting events until everyone who opposed him never existed. So, they made the hardest choice possible. They destroyed the only way into the world between worlds. Working together, Ezra and Ahsoka collapsed the ancient temple around the portal. Tons of stone and metal came crashing down, burying the entrance forever. The gateway to time itself disappeared under a pile of rubble. Just like that, the most powerful discovery in galactic history became the most buried secret. Only a handful of people know the world between worlds ever existed. Even among those few, most would rather pretend it never happened. It's the kind of secret that keeps you awake at night, knowing that somewhere under a pile of rocks is the power to rewrite reality itself. The whole episode proved something scary about the Force. All this time, people thought they understood what it could do. Turn out, they barely scratched the surface. Hidden in its mysteries are abilities that could reshape existence itself. But here's the thing that makes Ezra special. He had that power in his hands and chose to give it up. Most people would have kept the portal open, convinced they could use it responsibly. Ezra was smart enough to know that nobody can handle that kind of temptation. The world between worlds is still there, sealed under the ruins of the Lothal Temple. The ultimate cheat code for the universe, locked away because a teenager was wise enough to understand that some doors should stay closed. That's probably the most important lesson from the whole discovery. Having the power to change everything doesn't mean you should. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is walk away. Picture a small cube that fits in your hand but contains enough evil to destroy entire civilizations. That's exactly what Sith Holocrons are, and they keep showing up when people least expect them. These things look pretty harmless at first glance. Most are about the size of your fist, shaped like pyramids or cubes, and they glow with a soft red light. But inside each one lives the ghost of a dead Sith Lord, just waiting for someone to wake it up. Here's how they work. A Sith creates a holocron before they die, pouring their knowledge and personality into this little device. When someone activates it later, a hologram of the dead Sith appears and starts teaching. Sounds useful, right? There's just one problem. These things don't want to help you, they want to corrupt you. Unlike Jedi holocrons that require you to be calm and centered, Sith holocrons are pushy. They whisper to you when you're trying to sleep. They show you shortcuts to power that come with terrible costs. They make anger feel good and revenge seem reasonable. Take what happened to Ezra Bridger. He found a Sith holocron in an old temple and thought he could handle it. Just holding the thing made him hear voices at night. When he finally opened it, the holocron started feeding him dark side knowledge mixed with lies and manipulation. Before long, Ezra was making deals with Darth Maul and almost got everyone killed. That's what these things do. They find your weak spots and poke at them until you break. The Jedi have known about this problem for thousands of years. They built a special vault under their temple on Coruscant just to lock these things away. Dozens of Sith holocrons sat in that secure room, sealed behind blast doors and protected by every security measure the Jedi could think of. A lot of good that did them. When the Empire took over, Palpatine's Inquisitors broke into the vault and grabbed every holocron they could carry. The Emperor already had a pretty good collection of his own, including something called the Holocron of Heresies that he used to train Darth Vader. Adding the Jedi's stash just made him more dangerous. But here's the weird thing. Even good guys sometimes try to use these holocrons for the right reasons. Luke Skywalker once activated the holocron of Darth Krayt because he needed information about future Sith threats. He got the intel he wanted, but the holocron spent the whole time trying to turn him to the dark side. It's like trying to get directions from someone who hates your guts and wants you dead. Sure, they might tell you where to go, but they're probably leading you into a trap. The really scary part is how these things keep changing history. Back in the day, a Jedi named Exar Kun found a Sith Holocron and let it convince him to start a war that nearly destroyed the Republic. Sith apprentices have used holocrons to learn techniques that help them kill their masters. Even finding one can shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Every generation seems to discover these things all over again. Archaeologists dig them up from ruined temples. Smugglers find them in crashed ships. Sometimes they just appear in markets being sold as curiosities by people who have no idea what they're dealing with. And every single time someone finds one, the same cycle starts over. The holocron whispers sweet promises of power. The person thinks they're strong enough to resist. They're wrong. Either they get corrupted or they barely escape with their sanity intact. The Jedi used to have a phrase that would make everyone nervous. When someone said they were going on a holocron hunt, it meant trouble was coming. These little cubes might look innocent, but they've caused more chaos than most superweapons. Think about it this way. The Death Star could blow up planets, but it couldn't make good people choose to become evil. Sith holocrons do that every day. They're like viruses for your soul, spreading darkness one person at a time. The worst part is that they work. People who use Sith holocrons do get more powerful. They learn techniques that regular training could never teach them. But the price is always higher than they expected. You might gain the strength to conquer worlds, but you'll lose everything that made you human in the process. That's why finding a Sith holocron is both the best and worst thing that can happen to a Force user. It's like being offered everything you've ever wanted by someone who definitely plans to kill you later. Some people are smart enough to walk away. Most aren't. So the next time you hear about someone discovering a mysterious glowing cube in some ancient ruin, maybe it's better to just leave it buried. Some secrets are meant to stay lost. On the dead world of Moraband sits a tomb that holds the remains of the most important Sith Lord you've probably never heard of. His name was Darth Bane, and he completely changed how the Sith operated with just a few words. Two there should be, no more, no less. That's the rule of two, and it's been the foundation of every Sith plot for the past 1,000 years. Before Bane, the Sith were just another army of dark side users fighting each other as much as they fought the Jedi. After Bane, they became something much more dangerous. A secret order hiding in the shadows, always planning, always waiting for the right moment to strike. Bane's tomb sits in a valley filled with the graves of ancient Sith Lords. It's marked by a huge statue of the man himself, wearing the bone armor that made him famous. The sarcophagus underneath weighs several tons and radiates dark side energy so thick you can feel it in your bones. For almost 1,000 years, nobody bothered the place. The Sith had moved on from building fancy tombs and started focusing on staying hidden instead. Most Jedi didn't even know exactly where Bane was buried, and the few who did figured it was better to leave sleeping dogs alone. Then Yoda decided to take a field trip. The Jedi Grand Master was on some kind of spiritual journey during the Clone Wars, following visions that led him to Moraband. He wandered through the Valley of the Dark Lords like a tourist, checking out all the creepy Sith monuments. When he reached Bane's tomb, things got interesting fast. The stone sarcophagus cracked open with a sound like thunder. A massive figure rose from inside, glowing with red energy and sporting the same bone armor from the statue outside. Darth Bane was back, and he wasn't happy about having visitors. Now here's where it gets weird. Bane had been dead for centuries. This wasn't really him standing there, just some kind of Force ghost or vision, but it sure acted like the real deal. The Spectre looked down at Yoda with burning eyes and basically told him to get lost. Yoda being Yoda, he didn't scare easily. He took one look at this towering apparition and said it was just an illusion. The moment he called it out, the whole thing vanished like smoke. But even Yoda seemed a little shaken by what he'd seen. Think about what this means. 1,000 years after his death, Bane still had enough power left over to manifest as a ghost and intimidate intruders. That's not normal, even for a Sith Lord. Most dead people stay dead. Bane's will was so strong it kept a piece of him anchored to his tomb. The Jedi spent the next few decades trying to figure out what they'd learned. Here they were thinking the Sith were extinct, and they find evidence that the guy who created the modern Sith Order was still hanging around his gravesite. It made them wonder what else they didn't know about their supposedly defeated enemies. Turns out, a lot. Palpatine had known about Bane's tomb the whole time. He'd even managed to get his hands on Bane's personal holocron, using it to learn techniques that helped him conquer the galaxy. While the Jedi were patting themselves on the back for winning ancient wars, the Sith were studying in libraries the Jedi didn't even know existed. After the Empire fell, Luke Skywalker sent archaeological teams to explore Moraband properly. What they found wasn't encouraging. Bane's tomb still radiated dark side energy like a miniature sun. Sensors picked up readings that didn't make scientific sense. The whole area felt wrong in ways that equipment couldn't measure. The tomb itself told a story that worried the new Jedi. Carved right into the stone was Bane's philosophy. Two there should be, no more, no less. One to embody power, the other to crave it. It was like a mission statement for every Sith who came after him. For wannabe Sith, finding Bane's tomb was like visiting a holy site. Here was the grave of the man who saved their order from extinction and turned them into something truly dangerous. Standing before that massive sarcophagus, they could feel connected to a legacy that stretched back centuries. For Jedi, the place was just creepy. Walking into that tomb meant confronting the reality that their enemies had deeper roots than anyone wanted to admit. The Sith weren't just random bad guys who showed up to cause trouble. They were part of an organized tradition with rules, goals, and a clear vision for the future. Bane's epitaph was especially unsettling because it was basically a challenge. Every Jedi who read those words knew what they meant. Somewhere out there, two Sith were following Bane's plan. One master, one apprentice, working in secret to destroy everything the Jedi stood for. The tomb proved something that made everyone uncomfortable. The dark side doesn't just disappear when its users die. It clings to places and objects, waiting for someone new to find it. Bane's grave was still dangerous after 1,000 years, still radiating the kind of power that could corrupt anyone who spent too much time around it. What really got to people was how personal the encounter felt. This wasn't just sensing some leftover dark side energy. Yoda had a conversation with a dead Sith Lord. Even if it was just a vision or illusion, it felt real enough to matter. The discovery of Bane's tomb forced the Jedi to accept an uncomfortable truth. Their enemies weren't gone, just hidden. The Sith had been playing a longer game than anyone realized. following a plan laid out by a dead man whose influence reached across centuries. In the end, Bane got exactly what he wanted. His rule of two survived him, guided the Sith to ultimate victory, and nearly wiped out the Jedi forever. Not bad for a guy who'd been dead for 1,000 years. Some Sith Lords want to rule the galaxy. Others want to destroy it. Darth Nihilus wanted to eat it, and when he died, he left behind a mask that's still hungry for more. Picture the most terrifying Sith you can think of. Now make him worse. Nihilus was so consumed by the dark side that his body literally fell apart. His skin, his muscles, his bones, everything just dissolved into nothing. What was left was pure hunger, wearing black robes and a bone-white mask. This wasn't your typical power-hungry Sith Lord. Nihilus had turned himself into something that couldn't be satisfied. He would show up at planets and drain every living thing on them through the Force. Entire civilizations would just disappear, leaving behind empty worlds and dead silence. People called him the Lord of Hunger, and it wasn't a joke. When the Jedi finally managed to kill him, his body crumbled to dust. But the mask just clattered to the floor, looking harmless enough. Problem is, Nihilus had poured so much of himself into that thing that it was basically still alive. For centuries after his death, the mask bounced around the galaxy like a cursed hot potato. Nobody wanted to keep it for long, but nobody could resist trying it on either. See, the mask came with a tempting offer. Put it on, and you'd get Force powers even if you'd never had them before. Sounds great, right? Wrong. The mask didn't just give you power, it gave you Nihilus's hunger. Suddenly, you'd find yourself obsessed with consuming life energy. Every person around you would start looking like a snack. The more you used the mask's power, the hungrier you got, until eventually you'd eat yourself from the inside out. One group of smugglers found the mask in a crashed transport and thought they'd hit the jackpot. Within days, they were exhibiting all of Nihilus's worst traits. They became obsessed with death and destruction, started having visions of consuming entire worlds, and eventually turned on each other like rabid animals. That's what the mask does. It doesn't just corrupt you. It makes you into a copy of the most twisted Sith Lord who ever lived. Even just touching the thing was dangerous. People reported hearing whispers when they got near it. The mask would promise them power, offer them secrets, tell them they were special enough to handle what others couldn't. Classic dark side manipulation, except coming from a piece of bone that used to be someone's face. Scholars who studied the mask confirmed what everyone suspected. This wasn't just some leftover dark side energy. The mask was actively trying to corrupt anyone who came near it. It wanted to be worn, wanted to spread Nihilus's hunger to new victims, wanted to continue his work of devouring the galaxy one person at a time. The really scary part was remembering just how powerful Nihilus had been when he was alive. This was the guy who could show up at your planet and eat everyone on it without breaking a sweat. Entire star systems went dark when he came calling. The mask was all that remained of that incredible, terrible power. Think about that for a second. You're holding a piece of equipment that belonged to someone who could consume planets. Even broken and dead, it still carries enough of his essence to drive people insane. That's not the kind of souvenir you want sitting on your shelf. Even other Sith were scared of the thing. Most dark side users are willing to take risks for power, but Nihilus's mask was too dangerous even for them. They'd heard the stories about what happened to people who tried to use it. Becoming a copy of the Lord of Hunger wasn't an upgrade, it was a death sentence with extra steps. The mask changed hands dozens of times over the years, usually ending up with collectors who thought they were tough enough to handle it. None of them were. Some lasted longer than others, but they all eventually succumbed to the hunger. The lucky ones went crazy and died quickly. The unlucky ones lasted long enough to hurt other people first. What made it worse was that the mask actually worked. People who wore it did get incredible force powers. They could drain life energy, manipulate others through fear, and wield abilities that took normal Sith years to learn. But the price was always higher than they expected. You'd start by just wanting to feel that power again. Then you'd need to feed on stronger opponents to get the same rush. Before long, you'd be looking at your friends and family like they were batteries to be drained. The mask didn't just give you Nihilus's abilities, it gave you his endless, impossible hunger. The worst part was that there was no going back. Once the mask sunk its hooks into you, that was it. You'd spend whatever time you had left craving more power, more life energy, more of everything, while never being able to satisfy that need. Scholars eventually figured out that the mask was like a Sith Holocron, but worse. Holocrons try to teach and corrupt you slowly. The mask just grabbed you by the throat and forced Nihilus's personality into your head whether you wanted it or not. In the end, most people who found the mask learned the same lesson. Some artifacts are too dangerous to use, too corrupted to study, and too evil to keep around. The smart ones buried it again and tried to forget where. The dumb ones put it on and became someone else's problem. Darth Nihilus died thousands of years ago, but his hunger lives on in that bone-white mask. It's still out there somewhere, still whispering to anyone foolish enough to listen, still promising power to people who don't understand the cost. Some doors should never be opened, some masks should never be worn, and some hungers should never be fed. Three Jedi answered a routine distress call and accidentally stumbled into the birthplace of the Force itself. What they found there was so strange that even the Jedi Council couldn't explain what happened. It started during the Clone Wars when Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka were flying through space and picked up an ancient distress signal. Nothing unusual about that. Jedi respond to calls for help all the time. But when they followed the signal, they found something that shouldn't exist. A massive crystal monolith the size of a small moon was floating in empty space. The thing was huge, glowing with its own light, and pulling their ship toward it like a magnet. Before they could react, the monolith swallowed their ship whole, and everything went white. When the light faded, they found themselves on the strangest world any of them had ever seen. Welcome to Mortis, a place where the Force walks around and has conversations with you. The landscape kept changing like someone was flipping through different paintings. Mountains turned into oceans, deserts became forests, and the sky shifted colors every few minutes. Physics didn't seem to work properly. Time moved weird, and living in this impossible realm were three beings who called themselves the Ones. The father looked like a wise old man who'd seen everything twice. The daughter glowed with light and radiated peace and harmony. The son was all shadows and sharp teeth, basically the living embodiment of everything evil about the dark side. These weren't just powerful Force users. They were the Force, broken into three pieces and given personalities. The father explained that they'd been living on Mortis for thousands of years, keeping the Force in balance. The daughter represented the light side, the son was the dark side, and the father kept them from tearing each other apart. It was like cosmic family therapy, except the family members could reshape reality with their thoughts. But here's where things got weird. The father was dying, and he wanted Anakin to take his place. Remember, Anakin was supposed to be the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force. The father figured that meant Anakin could handle the job of keeping his kids from destroying the universe. He showed Anakin visions of what would happen if the son and daughter were left unsupervised. Spoiler alert, it involved the galaxy burning. Anakin wasn't interested in becoming a cosmic babysitter for eternity. He had a war to fight and people to protect back in the real world. But his refusal set off a chain of events that nearly got everyone killed. The son decided that if he couldn't have a new babysitter, he'd just remove the old one. He corrupted Ahsoka with dark side energy, turning her into his personal assassin. She actually died for a while there, which was traumatic for everyone involved. Then the son went after the father directly, planning to kill him and unleash his full power on the galaxy. The daughter tried to stop her brother by throwing herself between them. She took a mortal wound that should have killed the father, saving his life at the cost of her own. As she lay dying, she transferred her remaining life energy into Ahsoka, bringing the Padawan back from the dead. Now it was just the father and the son, and the old man wasn't strong enough to contain his dark side child anymore. That's when Anakin stepped in with a weapon he'd found lying around. The dagger of Mortis, the only thing in that realm capable of killing an immortal Force being. The fight that followed was like watching gods battle. The sun threw around power that could crack planets, while Anakin used the dagger to fight something that was basically evil incarnate. In the end, Anakin managed to stab the son, who died cursing everyone and everything. With both his children dead, the father had nothing left to live for. He took the dagger and ended his own life, completing the destruction of the cosmic family that had kept the Force balanced for millennia. And then everything just stopped. The three Jedi woke up back in their ship, flying through normal space like nothing had happened. The monolith was gone. Mortis was gone. There was no trace that any of it had ever existed. According to their ship's chronometer, no time had passed at all, but they remembered everything. The strange realm, the godlike beings, Ahsoka's death and resurrection, the cosmic battle between light and dark. It had all felt completely real while it was happening. When they got back to Coruscant and reported what they'd experienced, the Jedi Council didn't know what to make of it. Was it a vision, a shared hallucination, some kind of Force-induced dream? Nobody had any answers. The strangest part was that there was absolutely no physical evidence. Usually when Jedi go on adventures, they come back with scars or artifacts, or at least some proof that it really happened. This time, there was nothing, just three people with identical memories of an impossible place. Some scholars think Mortis was a pocket dimension created by the Force itself, a testing ground where the Chosen One could be evaluated. Others believe it was a glimpse into the Force's true nature, showing that what we think of as an energy field is actually something much more complex and alive. The really unsettling part is what happened to the balance after the ones died. If they really were keeping the Force stable and Anakin killed them all, what does that mean for the rest of the galaxy? Did destroying the cosmic balance help push Anakin toward the dark side? Did it make the Clone Wars worse? Nobody knows, and that's what makes the Mortis Monolith so mysterious. It appeared just long enough to show three Jedi something incredible, then vanished like it never existed. It's like the Force wanted them to see its deepest secrets, but only for a moment. The Jedi Council filed their report and tried to forget about the whole thing. But Anakin carried the memory with him for the rest of his life. He'd seen what true balance looked like, and he'd chosen to destroy it rather than become part of it. Maybe that choice defined everything that came after. Maybe refusing to take the Father's place was what started Anakin down the path to becoming Darth Vader. Or maybe it was all just a very elaborate vision designed to test his commitment to the people he cared about. The Mortis Monolith never appeared again, leaving behind more questions than answers. But it proved something important. The Force has mysteries that even the wisest Jedi can't understand. And sometimes those mysteries find you whether you're looking for them or not. When scouts first spotted something massive moving through the outer rim, they thought their sensors were broken. What they were looking at couldn't be a starship because it was alive, and it was heading straight for the galaxy with very unfriendly intentions. The Yuuzhan Vong worldships changed everything people thought they knew about space travel. While the rest of the galaxy built ships out of metal and circuits, these aliens had grown their vessels like plants in a garden. Each worldship was basically a living planet that could fly through space. Picture a chunk of coral the size of a city, but instead of sitting on the ocean floor, it's cruising between star systems carrying thousands of warriors who want to kill you. That's what New Republic forces found themselves facing when the Yuuzhan Vong invasion began. These things weren't just big, they were weird. No metal anywhere, no computer systems, no droids helping with repairs. Everything was alive. The hull was made of something called yorick coral that could heal itself when damaged. The engines were actually living creatures bred specifically to push the worldship through space. Even the weapons were biological, firing acid and launching swarms of fighters that looked more like insects than spacecraft. To understand why the worldships were so shocking, you have to remember what space travel normally looked like. For thousands of years, every species in the galaxy used the same basic approach. Build a metal hull, stick some engines on it, add a hyperdrive, and off you go. Sure, the details changed from species to species, but the fundamentals were always the same. Then along come the Yuuzhan Vong with ships that grow like trees and breed like animals. It was like discovering that while everyone else was driving cars, some other culture had learned to ride dragons. The worldships weren't just transportation either. They were entire civilizations packed into living vessels. Generations of Yuuzhan Vong had been born, lived, and died inside these things during their journey from another galaxy. Each worldship contained its own ecosystems, with different areas devoted to different castes of Vong society. The warrior areas were exactly what you'd expect. Training grounds, weapon storage, barracks for soldiers who dreamed of nothing but conquest. But there were also agricultural sections where the Vong grew their food, nurseries where they raised their children, and religious centers where they worshipped their violent gods. What made it even stranger was that the worldships were dying. After nearly 1,000 years of travel, some of them were starting to break down. The living coral was getting diseased, the biological systems were failing, and entire sections were rotting away. This added desperation to the invasion. The Yuuzhan Vong weren't just conquering for fun. They needed new homes because their old ones were falling apart around them. When the first major battle happened, New Republic forces got a nasty surprise. All their normal tactics were useless. Targeting computers couldn't lock onto living ships properly. Ion cannons that would disable mechanical vessels just tickled the worldships. Conventional weapons that could punch through metal armor barely scratched the coral hulls. It was like trying to fight a disease with a hammer. The tools didn't match the problem. The worldships could launch thousands of fighters that moved like living creatures instead of mechanical craft. They swarmed around Republic ships in patterns that no computer could predict because they weren't following programmed flight paths. They were following instincts. Worse yet, the worldships coordinated their attacks using creatures called Yamosks. These were basically living battle computers that could telepathically control entire fleets. While Republic commanders were shouting orders over communication channels that could be jammed or intercepted, the Yuuzhan Vong were thinking their battle plans directly into their ships' brains. The strategic implications were terrifying. Each world ship carried hundreds of thousands of Vong, along with all the resources they'd need to establish colonies on conquered worlds. Destroying one meant committing genocide on a massive scale. Letting one survive meant facing an enemy that could keep fighting indefinitely. In one crucial battle, Jedi infiltrators managed to sabotage a dying world ship from the inside. They turned the ship's own biological systems against it, causing it to consume itself. The victory denied the Yuuzhan Vong major reinforcements, but it came at the cost of millions of lives. Even damaged world ships were incredibly dangerous. One that was already falling apart still managed to devastate entire star systems before finally being destroyed. These weren't just ships you could disable with a lucky shot. They had to be completely killed, and killing something that size took enormous effort. The discovery of the world ships forced everyone to rethink what was possible. For centuries, people assumed that technology meant metal and circuits. The idea that you could grow a starship like a tree was so alien it didn't occur to anyone until they saw it happening. Xenobiologists were fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Here were entire ecosystems that could survive in the vacuum of space while traveling between galaxies. The biological engineering involved was beyond anything the Republic had ever attempted. Military commanders had nightmares about fighting enemies whose ships could repair themselves, adapt to new threats, and literally evolve better defenses during battle. How do you plan for an opponent whose weapons might be completely different from one engagement to the next? The war eventually ended with the Yuuzhan Vong being defeated and their surviving world ships guided to safe harbor. But the impact of discovering them lingers. They proved that somewhere out in the void between galaxies, there are species with technologies so different from our own that we might not even recognize them as technology. Deep in a swamp on a backwater planet sits the most important hole in the ground the Jedi ever found. It doesn't look like much from the outside, just another cave entrance covered in vines and mist. But step inside and you'll come face to face with your worst nightmare. The Dagobah cave is what happens when the dark side gets concentrated into one spot and left to simmer for centuries. Most places in the galaxy have some connection to the Force, but this cave is different. It's like a magnifying glass that takes all your fears and doubts and projects them right back at you in living color. Nobody knows exactly how the cave got this way, but the stories all point to the same thing. Long ago, a dark Jedi died here in a pretty violent way. Instead of just fading into the Force like most people do, his darkness soaked into the ground like spilled ink. Over time, that stain grew stronger and nastier until the whole cave became a concentrated dose of everything wrong with the dark side. Yoda found the place during the Clone Wars and immediately knew what he was looking at. This wasn't just some random dark side hotspot. It was a testing ground where the Force would show you truths you didn't want to see and ask questions you didn't want to answer. When Yoda first went inside, the cave hit him with visions of the future that were too horrible to ignore. He saw the Jedi Order falling, the Republic burning, and Palpatine revealed as the Sith Lord who'd been playing everyone for fools. The experience was so disturbing that even someone as wise as Yoda had trouble processing it. But here's the clever part. Yoda didn't run away from the cave. He built his hut right next to it. See, the cave's dark energy was so strong, it actually hid Yoda's light side presence from the Emperor. Palpatine could sense Jedi from across the galaxy, but with all that dark side interference, he couldn't detect one little green hermit living in a swamp. The cave that showed Yoda his worst fears also became the thing that kept him safe. Years later, when Luke showed up for training, Yoda decided it was time for the kid to face his own demons. He sent Luke into the cave with one piece of advice. Only what you take with you matters. Luke, being young and stubborn, took his weapons anyway. Big mistake. Inside the cave, Luke found himself face to face with Darth Vader. Not the real one, just a vision created by the cave's power. But this wasn't some friendly sparring match. The vision felt completely real, and Luke fought it like his life depended on it. When Luke finally managed to strike down the vision, Vader's helmet cracked open to reveal Luke's own face staring back at him. The cave was showing him the most terrifying possibility of all, that he could become the thing he hated most. The message was clear. The dark side wasn't something outside him that he had to fight. It was something inside him that he had to resist. The cave was warning him that anger and fear could turn him into another Vader if he wasn't careful. Luke walked out of that cave shaken to his core, but he'd learned something important. The real enemy wasn't the Empire or the Sith. It was the darkness in his own heart that could lead him down the same path as his father. That's what the Dagobah cave does. It strips away all the excuses and explanations and shows you the raw truth about yourself. Most people don't like what they see. The cave became a regular part of Jedi training over the years. Masters would send their students inside to face their fears and test their commitment to the light side. Some came out stronger, others came out broken. A few never came out at all. What made the cave so effective was that it didn't show you random scary stuff. It showed you personal fears tailored specifically to mess with your head. If you were afraid of failing your friends, you'd see visions of them dying because of your mistakes. If you were worried about turning to the dark side, you'd see yourself as a Sith Lord. The cave knew exactly which buttons to push to get the biggest reaction. Yoda used to say that the cave was strong with the dark side, but that was only half the story. The real power of the place was how it forced people to confront their own capacity for darkness. It was a mirror that reflected not what you were, but what you could become. The cave also proved something important about the Force itself. It wasn't just an energy field that connected all living things. It was something that could be shaped by emotions and events, something that could hold on to experiences and replay them for future visitors. In the end, the Dagobah Cave stands as one of the most honest places in the galaxy. It doesn't lie or flatter or make you feel better about yourself. It just shows you the truth and lets you decide what to do with it. Most people would rather avoid that kind of honesty. But for Jedi training to become truly wise and strong, sometimes you have to look in the mirror and face what's looking back, even if you don't like what you see. The cave is still there, waiting in the swamp, still testing anyone brave enough to step inside, still asking the same question it's been asking for centuries. When everything else is stripped away, who are you really?